introduce to all of you about our speaker today, which is Mr. Arthur Ken Raymond. Saya baca sikit lah biodata pasal beliau. He started programming back in 1986 and has been involved in the professional software industry in Kota Kinabalu since 1998. He is the co-founder of Persatuan Pengatur Cara dan Pembina ICT Sabah, which is a local NGO more well known as Kinabalu Coders, and he is also colleagues the Raspberry Pi and computer architecture communities and interested in PHP, Python, big data, the Internet of Things, which is IoT, and computer security. So professionally, he currently works in a local software company that known as Digital Heritage Sendirian Berhad and has been one of the architects behind some enterprise level state government projects, and he is also an alumni of the International Visitor Leadership Program IVLP that organized by the US State Department during the months of August-September 2017. During the program, he had the opportunity to examine and understand many different forms of social entrepreneurship in the United States and communicate with his counterparts on technology-oriented approach at the individual, city, and state level. So, hello, Mr. Arthur. How are you today?
Hello, Chick City, Nurazila. I'm doing fine today. I hope everybody is too.
Okay, I'm good too. Thank you. And since it is a long journey, which is since 1986 until today in tech industry, I'm pretty sure that you have a good experience in it. So, can you share to us what kinds of things that yang kami perlu tahu terutamanya student yang dalam bidang IT ni? So, tanpa buang masa, dipersilakan Mr. Arthur untuk menyampaikan perkongsian beliau.
Boleh. Terima kasih, Chick City lagi. So, hello ladies and gentlemen, selamat petang and welcome to this pembentangan. Pertama sekali, thank you very much also for University Malaysia Sabah sebab bagi chance juga bikin pembentangan mengenai data. So, tanpa melengahkan masa lagi, so saya share screen saya. So ini presentation dia. So sekiranya anda memerlukan salinan presentation ni, ada QR code di bawah, jangan risau. Nanti boleh scan QR code, saya pun juga bagi link. So I'll provide the link for the presentation later also. Because this presentation ada banyak demikian link dalam dia jugalah, which you might want to look at. So saya telah difahamkan that di audience hari ini mungkin terdiri daripada computer science, computing informatics, ada juga social scientist dan mungkin school of business juga. So this won't be so technical, but it is about data culture and acquisition. So data culture ni adalah pembudayaan data kalau guna bahasa Malaysia punya. So pembudayaan data ni is lebih kepada pemikiran dan konsep data. Dan juga bukan juga just kaedah, methodology dan technical, tapi pemikiran dia. What do you do with that data? How do you deal with data acquisition and so on? And a lot of this boleh diguna pakai semasa FYP anda, semasa tulis thesis kah, bikin thesis, and also in the industry, because as you will soon discover, actually tiada beza antara what you do in your FYP atau what you should be doing in your FYP and what you should be doing in the industry. So tanpa melengahkan masa lagi, just now Miss Siti has already explained who I am, so we won't go into here. Tapi sedikit sebanyak about digital heritage. Sebenarnya, Digital Heritage, the company which I work for, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Sabanet Sendirian Berhad, which is a government-linked company di bawah Kerajaan Negeri Sabah. And Sabanet ni, we handle 600 plus government sites di seluruh Sabah dan handle lebih kurang 34,000 government accounts. Tapi kami bukan bikin komputer di pejabat district office ya. Memang kami handle infrastruktur atau jaringan network dia di Sabah. Tapi bukan bagi internet juga. Ini lebih kepada local area network, demi wide area network dan sebagainya. So later sekiranya ada soalan juga, Jangan takut, jangan shy, jangan malu. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat atau selepas ni ada Q&A juga. And so jangan malu lah kalau mau tanya soalan pasal syarikat ke, mau tanya pasal data dan sebagainya. So let's talk about data first. So data is information about telling a story. So, tapi this story kan, it has to be logical, it has to be rational, and it has to make sense. Kenapa? Sebab once you can tell that story will lead you to a conclusion. So, sebenarnya, actually ini yang dikatakan data-driven decision making. Mungkin pernah dengar ni banyak kali. It's like, we must make data-driven decisions. So the reality is about data is that dia memang ada matlamat dan objektif dia. Data tu bikin cerita. Cerita tu haruslah rational. Tapi tujuan cerita itu dibina is sebab dia dapat um, dia membolehkan kami atau kita bikin sesuatu keputusan dengan fakta-fakta dan sebagainya. So itulah data. So just understand that data is information about telling that story. So these are the problems with data. Mungkin masalah-masalah ini dialami oleh FYP anda semasa pembikinan FYP anda atau juga in the industry. So pertama sekali, memang sentiasa ada data yang tiada. You have missing data or the data is inconsistent. So sekiranya anda membuat FYP anda and actually you find out, oh saya kena bikin eksperimen dan sebagainya sebab saya tak dapat cari data ni secara online, then this is one of the first problems you find. Secondly, sometimes you find that data. Mungkin data tu ada di dalam agensi lain, dalam jabatan lain dan sebagainya. Tapi yang masalah dia, bila kamu minta data tersebut, dia orang bagi tahu, oh, ini kena bayar lah, atau oh, ini kami tidak boleh share lah, tak boleh kongsi. We cannot share with you. So this is the other issue with data that we face today. Data tu kena silo. From that silo, sometimes when you do get the data, then you find out that data tu is inaccurate atau bias. Tapi bila kami cakap perkataan bias ni, jangan ingat that dia bias secara tersengaja. Of course, there are certain cases di mana data yang anda peroleh itu ada bias because dia orang memang dia on purpose kasih bias. Tetapi there's also the case
Bukanlah.
di mana bias tu actually secara tidak disengaja. For example,
Ada baru
sekiranya
je
anda
aku
bikin
tadi.
survey kamu, sekiranya anda bikin survey anda, ada orang yang belum lagi kena muted. Kasih mute tu.
Lima dia
Jangan risau, santai-santai saja kami.
Monster tu macam
Tunggu
tinggi lah sejarahnya kan. Tapi
just in case. Oh, okay, sudah muted. Bah. So just understand that sometimes data is biased, but it's not on purpose. For example, and mungkin ini case sebenar. Let's say I nak dapat data bagi B40 di Sabah. Tapi when you think about getting data dari B40 di Sabah, mungkin your first thought is, saya pergi tengok agensi kerajaan, mungkin jabatan kebajikan, and then dapatkan senarai daripada dia orang. But when you get the senarai, you suddenly realize that senarai itu tak lengkap. And then you realize also that biasanya orang yang dapat isi data untuk B40, dia orang ada nombor telefon ataupun dia ada handphone dan sebagainya. Tapi apa terjadi kepada B40, kalangan B40 yang tak ada telefon, yang tak ada mobile number, and then dia orang pun tinggal di kampung yang kena ambil 6 jam keluar masuk guna jalan kaki setiap hari. So this kind of bias is because infrastruktur lemah atau mungkin tidak sempat dapat dia punya data daripada kalangan atau demografik ini. Selain daripada bias, sudah tadi I also said sometimes the data is out of date. You get the data, but then you realize, oh, data ni 2019 lah, tiada data baru. And so in this scenario, you get outdated data. Finally, and this one yang special sikit bagi Sabah lah, and mungkin East Malaysia. Sometimes data tu ada, website pun ada semua, tapi tiada internet. So without internet, tak boleh access data. Atau when you try and get up-to-date data, suddenly you find out, oh, website error lah, tidak boleh dapat data. So inilah masalah-masalah yang dihadapi dalam data science. So as part of your pemikiran, as part of pembudayaan data, you must realize biasanya anda tidak akan dapatkan data yang 100% lengkap dan 100% up to date. And this is suatu masalah yang dihadapi oleh keseluruhan um, orang dalam bidang data science. Tak kira kalau di Sabah, di Malaysia atau di seluruh dunia. So, antara, let's say, data-data, not to say data buruk lah, but data tidak lengkap, let me introduce to you some of the problems with data. For example, saya rasa semua orang di sini memang tahu spreadsheet. Dah guna Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, LibreOffice dan OpenOffice. Tapi saya rasa anda memang juga terlihat spreadsheet seperti mana yang anda lihat di depan kamu sekarang. Spreadsheet ni bukan digunakan untuk menyimpan data. Instead, spreadsheet ini digunakan sebagai borang. So, kenapa kami menggunakan spreadsheet sebagai borang? Sebab senang mah, formatting pun senang, tidak payah left, right, adjust semua dalam barisan, semua dalam kolom. So, yang masalah dia, sekiranya spreadsheet digunakan untuk sebagai borang is that data ini senang dibaca oleh manusia tapi susah dibaca oleh mesin. Susah untuk dianalisakan. Sebab let's say anda melakukan borang seperti ini dalam syarikat yang kecil, besar ke and so on. This means that let's say ini invoice. Tapi let's say syarikat anda bikin 100 invoice. Maka to process this, anda perlu melihat 100 file yang berbeza. Tak ada cara untuk baca dia dengan menggunakan mesin dengan senang. So, ini adalah satu contoh penyalahgunaan tools yang sedia ada dalam data science, which means sebenarnya actually ini spreadsheet yang disalahgunakan sudah. Dia digunakan sebagai borang. Antara, let's say, contoh-contoh lain, semua ni macam ringkas saja. Tapi ini adalah masalah yang biasanya kami hadapi semasa kami bikin kerja kami di kerajaan negeri. Sebab bila kami pergi ke kerajaan negeri, sometimes dia orang bagi tahu kami, oh, kami sudah ada data, kami simpan sudah dalam spreadsheet. Tapi bila kami tengok spreadsheet tu, terkeluarlah semua dia punya mistake-mistake macam gini. So you can see di depan anda, ini adalah let's say satu senarai, spesies ikut sungai, ikut tahun. Tapi yang masalah dia, bila dia simpan data, dia biar tempat kosong yang kena tanda kuning tu. Sebab dia ingat, oh kalau manusia baca ni senang bah, dia nampak Osteochilus ni di bawah sungai Liwagu bah, Scleropages species pun di bawah sungai Liwagu bah. Tapi mana boleh import ni dalam mesin? Mesin nampak ni tiada sungai, tiada sungai, tiada sungai. So ini mistake pertama. Kena bersihkan data tu. Lebih baik kalau si penyimpan data atau the data entry person actually isi ni sebelum ni. Then, let's say mistake number 2. Ini also kami biasanya dapat. Dia orang suka guna merge fields. So, as you can see, di kawasan yang ditanda kuning tu, sepatutnya ada barisan yang mengandungi nama sungai. Tapi dia kasih merge saja. Ini sakitlah. Kena unmerge demi semua data dia, kemudian letak balik dalam sistem. So, and then mistake number 3, dia kasih campur aduk. Satu column, because dia punya screen kecil kan. So dia kasih campur aduk dia punya kolom. Scientific name dan tahun dalam kolom yang sama, then dia pecah satu barisan. So semua ni, walaupun dia nampak macam ringkas, macam mudah, sebenarnya ini adalah pembudayaan data. Seharusnya setiap barisan mesti standalone, which means dia lebih macam gini. Tengok, setiap barisan boleh berdiri dengan sendiri. So sekiranya anda melakukan FYP anda or you're doing data collection in the field, tolonglah jangan kasih data kamu dengan merge fields and so on. Ini adalah data mentah, raw data. Jangan kasih rumuskan dia. This raw data is important because tanpa raw data, tanpa data mentah, you cannot do further analysis of that data. So this is one thing that we would like to tell you. So when you're doing data collection, make sure you use standardized data entry. Avoid using merge fields and so on because this is the most important part. Dan biasanya, bila data mentah ni terlari, when this data, raw data, is entered the wrong way, it complicates the process. Dia merumitkan proses menganalisa dan merumuskan tu data downstream. Bila sudah masuk MATLAB ke, bila sudah masuk SPSS atau bila masuk Python and so on. So, itu sedikit sebanyak mengenai demi data acquisition. So, ingat, setiap barisan mesti berdiri dengan sendiri dia, standalone. Itu point dia. So, once you do have data, what do you do with that data? And here is a little bit of examples that I have. Number one, you can publish that data. Anda boleh berkongsikan data tu. Tapi not just you. Mungkin anda bikin FYP anda. You feel like, data ni sama share online? Boleh. Why not? Tapi jagalah. Make sure you don't share private and confidential data macam nama orang, my card dan sebagainya. Tetapi, also remember that when you're publishing data, that other people are also publishing data. So let's say anda bikin satu FYP. FYP adalah kekerapan student ponteng kelas, for example. And then you say, mungkin dia orang, you have a hypothesis. Hypothesis dia, student ni, dia lebih banyak ponteng kelas bila cuaca panas because aircon tidak berfungsi. Tapi then you realize, setiada data mengenai keadaan cuaca di UMS pada waktu-waktu ni. So jangan risau. Pergilah, carilah dengan Google, DuckDuckGo atau kalau mau guna Bing jugalah. Carilah sumber data lain yang berkongsikan data iklim dan cuaca. For example, dari Jabatan Meteorologi. Because, and satu contoh di sini, if you go to data.gov.my, data.gov.my adalah satu laman web yang dibangunkan oleh Kerajaan Negara Malaysia. Ini bertahun-tahun lama sudah, di mana jabatan dan kementerian lain, dia upload data set dia sendiri. So let's say Jabatan Kaji Cuaca, dia upload data cuaca dan sebagainya. So ini adalah satu sumber. Tapi ingat, you sometimes tak dapat sumber rasmi atau sumber rasmi tu dia silo and then tidak dapat tu data. So sometimes you may have to cari data daripada sumber-sumber yang tidak rasmi. For example, semasa di Persatuan Kinabalu Coders tu, memang kami let's say ada satu website nama dia haze.sabah.io. Anda boleh melawat laman web ni sekarang di mana kami ada satu sensor jerebu DKK. And then setiap 5 minit dia baca dia punya API which is dalam unit parts per million dalam bentuk 2.5 dan 10 micron particulate matter, and data ini boleh di-download secara percuma daripada website haze.sabah.io. So ini satu contoh yang ringkas. So memang ada sumber-sumber lain. Anda kena praktis lah. Kungfu Google cari sini cari sana untuk mendapatkan data yang sesuai untuk let's say projek anda, sama ada dia projek FYP atau juga dalam industri. Because seperti mana I kata lebih awal lagi, seringkali you cannot find 100% data lengkap daripada satu sumber. You have to dapatkan daripada pelbagai sumber. So ini maksud dia remix. Remix ni bukan music remix lah, kasih scratching. Tapi macam tu juga. Because sometimes you have multiple sources, data sources. Satu daripada sumber rasmi. Satu lagi dari sumber tidak rasmi. Remix ni, kamu ambil kedua-dua dataset, campur aduk, hubung kait, and then from there, you can do your kaedah statistics, metodologi dia punya confidence interval dan sebagainya, supaya anda boleh merumuskan ke semua dataset dalam satu dataset yang lebih besar dan lebih mantap. So, inilah maksud dia remix. Satu lagi contoh mengenai data remixing adalah karan.sabah.io. Sekiranya ini kali pertama anda pernah dengar website ni, this one ada contoh di sini. So, karan.sabah.io ni sebenarnya, tunggu, ada demi example di sini. So, let me buka web browser saya. Ini haze.sabah.io. So as you can see ini live nih, berapa banyak microgram per meter 3. So ini haze.sabah.io. But from here, if you lihat SESB, SESB adalah lembaga elektrik Sabah lah. So apabila ada pemotongan bekalan elektrik di Sabah ni, memang dia post notis penutupan kecemasan macam gini di depan anda. Yang masalah dia, ini satu masalah data. Dia orang tidak post Text, ini gambar. So as you can see, it is picture of text. Senang dibaca manusia, tapi tak boleh dibaca dengan mesin. Well, boleh dibaca lah, tapi mesti bikin programming sini sana. So ini adalah satu sumber data juga, walaupun dia gambar. So untuk membaca data ni, kami menggunakan bagi student-student com science, kami guna OCR, Optical Character Recognition. Kami baca tu gambar, kemudian kami ekstrak demi teks daripada gambar tersebut, kemudian masukkan dalam database dan menghasilkan satu website ni yang nama dia karan.sabah.io yang memaparkan semula semua data yang dibaca daripada Twitter feed SCSB. So daripada website ini, senang, tak payah login dalam Twitter, tak payah login dalam Facebook. Dengan pemaparan data ni, anda boleh pergi kepada karan.sabah.io dan terus tengok, oh hari ini sekarang ada di KK ya, ada pemotongan elektrik sana menggatal, sana kampung rampayan dan sebagainya. Dan anda juga boleh melihat notis-notis lain. Sebentar, I accidentally terback keluar daripada the what. Dan daripada data asas, daripada data mentah yang kami petik daripada Twitter dan Facebook, kami dapat menghasilkan lebih banyak analisa mengenai data tersebut. For example, berapa purata tempoh setiap pemotongan bekalan. Sekarang bulan Ogos, purata dia lebih kurang 9 jam. Nah, tengok 9 jam kena potong elektrik sekarang kalau di seluruh Sabah. Berapa banyak diorang post dan tweet setiap hari, berapa banyak gangguan harian, berapa banyak tempoh yang diberikan antara notis pemotongan sehingga pemotongan yang berjadual dan sebagainya. So semua ni data bukan SCSB yang bagi. Ini adalah data yang kami hasilkan sendiri daripada analisa data mentah pemotongan. And seterusnya di dalam karan.sabah.io ini, mungkin anda boleh lihat di depan anda demi graf di sini, setiap jalur melebar ni adalah satu distrik. And then setiap jalur yang vertical bar ni, bermakna hari itu ada pemotongan elektrik. So when you look at this data yang sudah dirumuskan, you can actually see, wah, Tawau banyak juga, macam setiap hari ada satu pemotongan. Nampak KK juga. Tengok KK setiap hari untuk 180 hari in total mesti ada satu pemotongan somewhere in KK. So this is what you do with data. You tell stories. Bukan just kumpulkan data. Your thesis too is a story. The project that you're working for, mungkin untuk kerajaan negeri, mungkin untuk syarikat lain. Actually sebenarnya kamu kumpulkan data so that you can tell a story with that data. And this is the most important part why you are doing data. You are using that to tell stories. So, back again to the presentation. Back again to the presentation. So that's a little bit about remixing data. So without further ado, because kami sudah pass halfway point of this presentation, then ada Q&A juga, let's talk about something yang close to us all and also to our negeri dan negara. Here is a COVID-19 case study, something that, not to say Sabanet yang bikin, but something that I also personally did semasa COVID-19, sejak like the last year, bulan Oktober. Semasa bulan Oktober last year, one of the major difficulties yang dialami oleh hospital-hospital di merata Sabah is demia pesakit-pesakit COVID-19. Diorang kena masuk hospital. So these are called referrals. Semua pesakit-pesakit COVID-19 is referred to hospitals across Sabah. And of course, di Sabah, we talk about West Coast and East Coast. So ini adalah mengenai West Coast. On the West Coast, ini adalah masalah yang dialami. Semua kes COVID-19 perlu dilaporkan ke Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So this one memang is SOP daripada KKM dan Jabatan Kerajaan Negeri Sabah. At the start of it all, sebelum kami masuk, all they had was a Google form. Now, ingat, Google form tu, dia guna Google form saja. And of course, you're seeing the actual Google form di depan anda. So the problem is this. When we started, or when they started, kebanyakan proses adalah secara manual, guna kertas sahaja. So unfortunately, they had no choice. Tak ada masa untuk bangunkan sistem sebab banyak pesakit datang, banyak COVID positif datang, especially bulan Oktober tahun lalu. So all they could do is bikin Google Form. So memang dia extremely basic lah, tapi was better than the manual process. Masuk data, and then boleh guna Google Sheets, kasih maintain, boleh export, ikut district dan sebagainya. Unfortunately, bila this problem of COVID-19 berlarutan, extend, sentiasa ada kes baru masuk, then memang dia akan come to a limit where reporting pun start failing, and then tidak boleh track berapa patient masuk, like beribu-ribu record masuk dalam sistem ni. So, to solve this problem, they approach community kami, not saya sajalah, tapi Kinabalu coders untuk tolong. So, tadi yang bahagian kotak biru ni was the original system. So what we did was, tanpa membazirkan masa atau duit, what we did was we created an entire infrastructure based on nothing guna Google. Google Forms, Google Sheets, Google App Scripting seperti disenaraikan sana lah. Google App Scripting ni bagi mereka-mereka yang minat, Google App Scripting guna JavaScript saja. So kalau kenal JavaScript boleh guna Google App Scripting tu. Guna Google Mail untuk hantar notis kepada setiap doktor yang hantar data, guna Google App lah. So every time ada submission, boleh hantar email. Then guna Google Data Studio untuk menghasilkan dashboard yang dapat digunakan oleh setiap doktor dan setiap hospital untuk memantau pesakit-pesakit COVID-19 di seluruh West Coast Sabah. So that's why the point that I'm trying to make here is, ini bukan, you can say ini adalah sistem yang kompleks dan rumit, tapi sebenarnya notice dia punya tooling tak guna banyak programming, tak guna banyak data analysis tools yang khas, tak guna MATLAB, tak guna SPSS dan sebagainya. The point is here, yang penting ni bukan tools yang kamu guna, tapi is the pemikiran dia. You must know bagaimana data ni pump dari A ke B. How do you process that data? Siapa yang perlu bikin pemantauan? In most scenarios, all they need to know is berapa banyak pesakit masuk hari ini. So, janganlah bikin sistem yang rumit-rumit atau yang kompleks atau data analysis yang kompleks. Dia seharusnya fit the purpose and function of the system, which is untuk pemantauan. So, actually, tidak banyak code. Actually, the only code yang ada, yang nombor 7 ni, minimal code for this bits, is untuk bahagian ni. Ini dia. Because dari segi data yang sudah masuk dari sistem, kami dapat menghasilkan live real-time maps menggunakan Google Geocoding dan juga sedikit JavaScript, sedikit leaflet. Ini semua open source ni. Ada link-link di bawah ni. Sekiranya anda minat, nak belajar, nak bikin map macam gini, ada link-link dia di bawah ni slide. So, tapi bukan dia punya heat map lah. Heat map ni private sikit. But the reality is, we can use this to monitor growing residential clusters across the west coast of Sabah. And this one is bukan sistem yang khas dibikin untuk data storage, data processing. It's just sedikit JavaScript, sedikit Google Sheet, sedikit geocoding. Yang penting again is not kamu tune programming. Bukan expert programming. It's just that you know, oh, this data, I think boleh guna pakai for alamat kan. I guna alamat ni, I boleh jadikan dia GPS. Then dari GPS, to preserve the patient privacy, kami plus minus 100 meters supaya we will know exactly di mana rumah dia. And then koordinat GPS tu digunakan bikin heat map. And from there, boleh kenal pasti cluster sama dia growing or shrinking across Sabah. And then dia punya mobile app dia, actually this one, you can use AppSheet. Ini secret dia. For a lot of people yang FYP dia bikin app, janganlah bikin app saja sebab ada tool sudah right. AppSheet ni boleh diguna pakai bikin app tanpa programming. All you have to do is link AppSheet tu dengan your Google Sheet, and then dia terus boleh jadi app sudah. Dia baca Google Form, and then dia bikin form sendiri sudah dalam dia punya mobile app, which means no programming required. For simple data entry apps and what, actually boleh guna AppSheet. So AppSheet tu free if you're just doing it for 10 users. So ini Later, if you like to know more about it, tanya-tanya sajalah. Tapi the point is here, just with Google Sheets, just with Google Forms, you can acquire useful data and tell important stories. So don't think you have to be expert in everything. Don't think you have to be experts in MATLAB, in SPSS, or any other specialized tool that exists out there. Don't think you have to be an amazing programmer. You don't have to start programming from 1986. Because all this about data is pemikiran, is the thought process involved with data, not the actual technical side, although that too is a discussion into itself. So that's the case study. Here are some of the lessons that was learned from doing all of this and data over time. Number one, jangan ingat tadi nampak heat map cantik, dashboard pun cantik, but the reality is all the managers, all the bosses, your lecturers semua mungkin dia minta juga, saya mau dashboard, mesti ada dashboard, otherwise project tidak lengkap. But the reality is you spend all your time, 80% of your time preparing data, the boring part of data science. Boring tapi penting. You spend 80% of your time preparing your data, bikin formula, bikin analisis, pam dari A ke B ke C ke D. Akhirnya, lepas tu then, you spend 20% of your time bikin dashboard cantik. So remember this, walaupun dashboard glamour, tanpa data asas, tanpa data mentah, you will not have your dashboard glamour. So jangan lupa, as you sebagai pengumpul data, penyimpan data, and the data scientist behind it, right? Actually, you are here 80% of your time in data prep. This is one of the most important things. That's why sometimes in kerajaan negeri or kerajaan negara, I'm sure sama juga, ada banyak bos-bos dia minta saya mau dashboard. But when you look carefully at the organization, tak kira jabatan ke kementerian ataupun SMI, small medium industry, small medium enterprise, right? You suddenly realize dashboard kami boleh bikin tapi tiada data. Itu masalah dia because there wasn't a data culture in place. Tiada orang yang simpan data dengan betul dan sebagainya. So anda sebagai student or as viewers of today, the audience, please be aware that data collection is really important and you shouldn't kasih ketepikan the data collectors. Don't think they play a small part. They play the biggest part. Another thing that we learn about best practices is sedaya upaya keep your data open. Reduce the barriers to data. You might think, oh, Microsoft Excel ni, they are free install on my laptop. Jadi they are free. No, Microsoft Excel is not free. For those in government, for those in companies, kami kena bayar Microsoft Excel loh. So imagine betapa frust kami, right? When we go to an agency and they say, oh, semua data kami dalam Microsoft Excel. And the problem is, of course kami boleh bayar, sudah kami ada Microsoft Office, but everybody thinks Microsoft Excel is free because it's pre-installed. It is not. If you want to use Microsoft Excel officially for your data, right, actually you have to pay. It's the same thing that, let's say, Tableau, kalau for those who pernah dengar Tableau reporting, Tableau bukan free, Tableau mahal betul, mahal gila. But the thing is, say, sama guna ni mah glamour ba, guna Tableau. Itulah the experts that are using. It's the same thing like saying designers suka Macintosh, mesti guna Photoshop. Tak, jangan. The point is, you don't need glamorous tools to do data. So just remember, try to avoid things that dikatakan price gated, which means walled gardens lah. And of course the other one is proprietary. Ini semua keyword dia bold sudah. Tapi ingat, memang menggunakan tool-tool percuma, dia ada cabaran dia juga. I'm not saying semua senang. But I'm saying is, gunalah ni sebagai peluang untuk menjadi lebih kreatif, lebih resourceful. Because when you use free stuff, right, you think more. You think of better solutions rather than just kena spoon feed. And this is another thing. Try not to get spoon. Of course, spoon feed senang lah. You feel better and so on. Tapi free ni, cabaran dia will teach you new things. So why not cuba-cuba? And then for managers, sudah cakap tadi lah, jangan jadi tool elite ba. Jangan say, mesti guna Microsoft Office, mesti guna Macintosh. Ini susah ni. Sebenarnya, actually it should be sebaliknya ba. Managers sepatutnya lebih open, which means that they actually say, oh, I can accept open office, I can what by, because they should know better. So hopefully you guys understand, jangan jadi tool elitis. That's why sumber terbuka ni, open source, bagus, because it teaches us to be what? And of course, jangan lupa lah, even though ada banyak format, CSV2 is one of the most important formats, comma separated values. Everybody, LibreOffice, OpenOffice, and so on, boleh guna CSV. If you like to know more about semua ni, about open data and so on, there's the open source open data handbook. Ada link dia di sini. So if you like to know more, you can also read it atau boleh tanya juga nanti. So we're coming to the end. Just for those yang nak masuk deeper and deeper into this, because data science ni besar, powerful. Just to let you know lah, Google Sheets formulas are powerful. Actually, this one tidak lengkap. Google Sheets formulas are more powerful than Microsoft Excel formulas. So here's the thing. If you like to cuba-cuba, right, you should experiment with Google Sheets formula. Link di sini, pergi kepada documentation. Just to let you know, Google Sheets can become a database. You can, for those yang tahu SQL atau SQL language, you can query Google Sheets dengan menggunakan a variant of SQL. Google App Scripting bagus dipelajari. Not because saya pro Google, but because Google App Scripting guna JavaScript. So if you belajar sedikit Google App Scripting, Anda akan pandai juga, not just bikin Google App Scripting, Anda juga pandai JavaScript. So why not kill two birds with one stone, or kill more birds with one stone, and do both? Because at the end of the day, Anda akan belajar JavaScript. And then finally, if you want to practice dengan menggunakan bahasa pengatucaraan yang sesuai untuk data, you can also get started with the Python language. And it can be an alternative to MATLAB, SPSS, and similar toolkits. Yang penting, guna Pandas. Pandas adalah nama library yang ada dalam Python yang boleh digunakan as a statistical package. And of course, for those yang mau tinggi-tinggi lagi, you can always do R language, yang huruf R. The R language, that's an even deeper stage into data. But for now, kami cakap pasal Python lah, sebab UMS ada Python class sudah. So ada sedikit bonus ini. If you want to know how that data can be used for machine learning, I won't cover it so. Ada link kepada teachable machines ini. Di sini, Anda boleh bikin AI dan deep learning dalam browser Anda sendiri. So I won't go into this, but you can learn about it here in this link. And if you just want to practice Python, tapi Anda malas mau install Python di atas laptop Anda atau Jupyter Notebook dan sebagainya, you can also do it online with Google Colab. Google Colab free lah, buat sementara waktu lah. I don't know how long you'll be free, tapi it's been free for the past 3 years. You can use this to practice sedikit Python. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, just remember, data ni is a thinking person activity. Your role in data science, tak kira bidang mana, com science, social science mana, is you need to connect the dots between knowledge silos. Because actually data tu di merata tempat, di mana-mana saja dapat data. In fact, just to be clear what I mean about terms of data, belum lagi, in terms of data is, sebentar, I want to actually buka semua slide tadi tapi tidak dapat, mana tu? One moment. So what do we mean about that data as thinking person? For example, online, thekaggle.com, you can find data sets for almost everything. Heart and disease data set, Tom and Jerry cartoon data set, Toronto subway, banyak ni, guna search saja on kaggle.com. And then you can find all sorts of code that you need. See, fruit and vegetable pizza price, predictions, and so on. Dia punya models dan sebagainya. Semua ni dalam Python atau R and so on Kaggle. Then, recently, for those yang tak pandai Git, inilah masa kamu pandai Git, because MOH sudah publish dia punya data for COVID-19 dengan menggunakan CSV online on GitHub. So why not use GitHub? And then from here, you see, let's say Anda minat. Maybe you're in social science, tapi kamu minat pasal COVID-19. Here is some data that Anda boleh guna pakai sudah. Baru saja update. Every day, daily dia update. So that's why data ni di merata tempat. Cuma dia kena silo. Your job as data scientist is to take everything and bring them together. So when you bring them together, you break down the knowledge silos, you make more data, useful data out of it, tell better stories with it. So in your organization, tak kira orang yang paling atas atau orang yang paling bawah, the data collectors versus the data collectors versus the managers and so on who want to see dashboards, you need to keep them in the loop. Make sure that the data collectors know why they're collecting the data. Make sure they can see their own progress so that they are motivated to collect their data in the correct way. And of course, the managers must also recognize that in order to have your beautiful dashboards, in order to do your data-driven decisions, you must have raw data. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's a little bit about data culture and about the acquisition process and some of the problems we face. So thank you so much for your time. Kalau ada hands-on, I can show a bit, and there's also Q&A sekarang. So back to you, Cik Siti.
All right, nice. Thank you for the informative and interesting sharing, Mr. Atta. So now kita sesi Q&A lah. So kalau mana yang ada soalan tu boleh tinggalkan soalan di chat box. Kalau mana-mana yang malu untuk bertanya tu, manalah tahu malu kan sebab orang lain nampak dia punya pertanyaan, boleh letak situ privately dengan saya lah sendiri. So saya diberitahu ada pihak Sabanet juga yang hadir pada hari ini. Thank you pihak Sabanet dan welcome. Terima kasih sebab hadir dan sangat-sangat dihargai. So kita take tu dululah bagi rehat Mr. Atta sebab penat betul bercakap tadi, panjang betul. So kalau mana yang ada soalan tu boleh tinggalkan di chat box ya.
Ada senampak ni is like ada link check in check out. Is it for karan.sabah.io?
Miss Jen.
Iya. Just in case, karan.sabah.io, sekiranya Anda nak data daripada karan.sabah.io, jangan lupa, just check on the page. Sometimes, biasanya lah, for sites yang data terbuka, the footer usually ada, tengok, ada suapan notice dan suapan statistics. Boleh nampak screen saya, I think, yang suapan notice dan suapan statistics. Bagi karan.sabah.io lah. Some sites dia share data macam gini, tengok, terus dalam bentuk JSON. Terus boleh baca, proses dan import dalam database. So, just untuk makluman anda lah, kalau ada link, kalau pertanyaan itu mengenai link tersebut. Saya kenal ni dalam dia punya chat. Dia punya yang PyFi ni, PyFi by the way is visitor tracking data. So actually this is something interesting. Just to supaya semua orang tahu apa itu PyFi. Sementara, I cari dia punya data terlebih dahulu. Let me just show satu contoh data. Bentar. Never mind. Continue asking questions. Saya akan what in again lepas tu. Okay. There's a question sini. Hi, Mr. Arthur. From your experience, except from all the challenges you stated, what else the challenge you think is faced by the person who starts or pursue their job in a data-driven environment? Okay, so I'll be bluntly honest with you, Daphne. The problem is about data-driven environments right now is in Malaysia, not just Sabah, there's very little appreciation for data actually. A lot of people, and I'm not being political when I say this or critical of anyone of politics or whatever, there are a lot of managers and politicians today who talk about data but fundamentally don't understand what the value of data is. And again, I'm not being critical or political when I make this statement. It's just the reality we face. Many people give lip service to data, but they don't appreciate the true value of data, nor the time and money that is spent to collect that data. Because as again I mentioned earlier, the problem is a lot of higher ups, bosses, wherever you find, they want dashboards, but they don't realize that to have dashboards, you must sometimes have years and years of historical data. But when you look back at the company, and this is an actual challenge, the company or the agency, you find out they've never been storing data. So without the raw data, the base data, how are you going to deliver the dashboard for them? Because there's no way to get the data. So that's why they don't understand that there's that fundamental there. But here's the time that we change this. As students, as employees, and so on, this is where we push awareness of that data culture. You must have a data culture in your organization from the bottom up, not the top down. Otherwise, the top can keep on talking and talking and talking, but nothing gets done. The bottom must start collecting data in a proper way and getting it out. A good example is the MOH data for COVID-19. If you thought about it, a true data-driven organization would have already done this months ago. But MOH has only just started recently sharing this data. Actually, I think less than a month ago. Again, I just want to clarify. I'm not criticizing, I'm stating the actual fact. If you were truly data-driven, you would have done this in the first 1 month or 2 months of COVID-19, something like March 2020. But apparently, it took us almost 1 year and a half before somebody finally had this brilliant idea. Let's share the basic data because there's nothing private or confidential about it, and other people can use it. And you see, that's the challenge. So I hope that gives you some idea of that other challenge. That challenge is not technical. The challenge is thinking, mentality, and has always been. In fact, even when we do other programming systems that are not related with data, the challenge is always convincing the bosses or the staff, right? Why is this better? Why it should be done this way? Because you can show as much proof as you want, but they'll just keep saying, we've been doing this like this forever and it works. Why do we have to change? And therein lies the problem. It's a question of mentality. I hope that answers the question for the challenge.
Okay, now soalan yang send private dengan saya lah. First, dia tanya, when I search for data, how to know if the data is reliable and should we just assume?
Okay. This is a good question, actually. How do you know data is reliable? Okay, there are a few cases for this, so I'll address each of these cases. Case pertama, data tu datangnya daripada sumber rasmi. For example, data.gov.my. This one usually is easy because the data is from a primary source. Bermakna dia datang terus dari kementerian dan jabatan. So it's safe to, saya akan guna perkataan ni, assume that data tu adalah betul. But of course, as you know, they always say assuming makes an ass of you and me. Sorry, ada bahasa Perancis tadi. But the reality is, in mathematics, in statistics, you make all sorts of assumptions. And assumptions too is bukan assumptions yang saja-saja bikin assumptions. They are official assumptions. So therefore, dalam case pertama, if data tersebut datang daripada sumber rasmi, you can more or less confirm that you can use it as is, boleh diguna pakai. But let's say Anda mengambil data daripada karan.sabah.io atau haze.sabah.io atau daripada sumber-sumber lain yang sekunder punya secondary sources, tertiary sources, or whatever. You cannot ascertain whether the data is accurate or not. Well, this is why there are statistical methods, things like confidence intervals. You can also do something else. You tak payah trust semua data, tak perlu percaya. Why not verify the data kalau boleh? There's this phrase, don't trust, verify. How can you verify? Satu contoh, let's say kami ambil contoh karan.sabah.io tadi. So tadi sudah saya bagi tahu, karan.sabah.io ni dia petik daripada SESB, dia masuk website, kemudian dipaparkan. But of course somebody may raise the question, karan.sabah.io ini betul tak? Is it really true? Mungkin data ni is fake data. Dia tidak petik daripada SCSB. So, of course, this is satu way untuk menimbulkan ketidakpastian dalam data. But there's an easy way to confirm. The easiest way to confirm is pergilah karan.sabah.io. And sometimes we as data persons can make it easier. See, notice here it says Kota Kinabalu 1520. Ui, ini mungkin fake data ni. But we made it a bit easier. Tengok ada tweet symbols ini. So sometimes the website gives you the link to the primary source. Ini dia punya primary source dia. Dia punya gangguan bekalan elektrik. So that's why you don't have to just trust atau percaya dengan semata-mata percaya saja. Look for ways to verify the data walaupun dia datang daripada sumber-sumber lain. So this is probably the most important thing. So primary source can trust. Harap-harap lah. Even that also sometimes lebih baik you actually analyze the data betul-betul. Second case, you may be coming from unofficial source yang tidak rasmi. Look for ways you can verify the data. So bukan saja mau kasih verify beratus-ratus punya notice di sini lah. What I mean is, secara rawak, pick a notice, see that this notice matches apa yang ada pada dia punya sumber primer dia, the primary source. And in the third case, di mana data tu memang susah untuk dikenal pasti mana sumbernya dan tiada cara untuk verification, well, this is where you need to compare, bandingkan data tersebut dengan sumber-sumber atau data set lain. This one, you don't have a choice. If you're really unsure about the confidence of the data set that you have, you need to look for other better data sources walaupun tidak lengkap, and then bandingkan antara dataset yang sedia ada. For example, dalam contoh I bagi tadi, Jabatan Kebajikan senarai B40. Maybe senarai B40 tu tak lengkap dari Jabatan Kebajikan, but you can get another data source, let's say daripada JPN, Jabatan Pendaftaran Negara, senarai semua IC untuk satu distrik. Then you at least know jumlah orang lebih kurang for that, atau daripada Banci Malaysia. Then kamu bandingkan the number of B40 di sana versus B40 daripada Jabatan Kebajikan. And sometimes, as a data scientist, you may be a case, you have to decide actually which one is the better data set daripada kajian sumber-sumber dia dan juga daripada dia punya margin of error for each data set. So this is a choice that you data scientists will have to do as you become more experienced. Sometimes you have to decide when you're faced with incomplete data, what do I do? And dia bergantung kepada case tertentu. For example, if my objective saya is bagi bantuan B40, so I would rather take sebagai leader lah, I would rather take yang overestimate bukan underestimate. Why? Walaupun dia bazir duit, ini bermakna that kalau saya overestimate the number of B40, orang tidak akan kelaparan. So these are hard choices that sometimes data science cannot answer because masalah dia is kekurangan data. So there is no easy solution. All you can do is lepas the problem is over atau mula mereda, is then you work, kenapa data tidak lengkap? Bolehkah saya implement systems atau bikin kajian sepenuhnya yang dapat melengkapkan data yang hilang atau yang data yang tiada? So this too is also part of you have to identify kelemahan dalam data dan secara proaktif ambil langkah-langkah untuk melengkapkan data tersebut, data set tersebut. So I hope that menjawab soalan juga. Senampak ada soalan juga lagi itu.
Ada lagi soalan private.
Boleh.
Okay. Dia tanya, I have read about data is the new oil. Will there be a data world?
A data world? It is already a data world, to be honest. So actually, pasal about the data world ba kan, Miss Siti?
Data
Itu
world.
dia punya,
Data world.
yeah, data world. Okay. So I think this one, I can also answer Gianna Siu's question because Gianna Siu's question also asks, I would like to know what do you think about the job market for data scientists in Malaysia? That one tadi jawab sudah. But I will add a little bit more and then pasal data world. For your information, the world is already a data world. When you look at Google, when you look at Facebook, when you look at Amazon, actually their primary goal is selling and buying data, and it's your data they're buying and selling. How they do it is advertisements, or maybe like Food Panda, Grab Food. How do they know what's your favorite food? That's because bila mu beli tu Grab Food, Food Panda, right? Kamu sentiasa, let's say, beli Western food. So the system will always suggest to you, makanlah yang makan ni daripada Western punya what, dari Upper Star ka or whatever, di KK and so on. The idea here is it is already a data world, a data-driven world. But here's the problem, and this is a bit about the job markets. Although the world is data-driven, a lot, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of companies, right, they don't have specific roles atau jawatan bagi data scientists di Malaysia. Kurang. There's not a lot of job scopes ada, you see, data science. Biasanya, data science is part of a bigger job scope. For example, data science is useful in cybersecurity, but data science is also useful, let's say, in insurance agents. So you wouldn't actually see data science posts, but you might see stuff like actuary for insurance company. Maybe in a company you see cyber security, and one of the job scopes is analysis of vulnerability data and so on. So although there is a data science role, you seldom find it except in big companies like IBM, Asia, and so on, where there's such a thing as a chief data scientist. But in smaller companies, even like Sabanet, you won't find chief data scientists. I too am not a data scientist officially. I'm a project consultant, but we handle a lot of data. And when we deal with individual projects, like for example, biodiversity data, project management data, foreign worker data, and so on and so forth, all of this require a degree of data science. Not sorry, I don't want to use the word degree. Bukan ada data science degree. It requires penguasaan data science, because inside you'll be doing statistical methods. Sometimes it's just begin graph, but sometimes you analyze the data for problems like cybersecurity. How can you predict network usage over time? Maybe in terms of like, in terms of other data sets, like tadi I said B40, you'll be analyzing it to say, oh, berapa percentage B40 so that we can sediakan berapa banyak bakul makanan dan sebagainya. So hopefully that sort of answers the job market for data scientists. So don't just look for data scientists. You have to be at least skilled in something else as well, closer to your discipline. Like if you're computer science or computing informatics, you might not, your first job may not be data science because maybe also tidak cukup pengalaman. But just understand that if you handle programming, if you handle databases, eventually you go into data science as well. So that is your data world as well. It is a data-driven world, but it doesn't mean secara rasmi, it's not officially data-driven, but everybody uses data, and data is very important. Let's see now. Ada soalan lagi ni. Say, how do we handle the people who gave us the correct data, ada air quotes ni, and proceeded to tell us to use and store, even the data clearly has error, especially if the people is at a higher order? Ini susah. Yes, there is such a thing as correct and right data. So far, nasib baiklah, in my official line of work, we've never had to do something like this. In other words, use incorrect data. Because everybody, I tell you, termasuk kami juga lah, is bukan diorang juga, we all blur sotong pasal data. So yeah, everybody is blur about data. Don't think you're an expert on data. In fact, the best way to approach data sets is to think, I don't know anything about this data. So let's do some standard statistical analysis and methods on that data. But let's just say this case comes up. Somebody demands that you use this data set. So, okay, I can use the data set, but maybe if I see this data set looks incorrect, right, then I would definitely put in the small print, the margin of error for this data set is say plus minus 20%. And then I'll also put down the confidence interval appears to be 80% only, because biasanya if you do a lot of statistics, right, a preferred confidence interval is 95 to 99%. So if you look at the data and you think the data is incomplete, right, you should perform a confidence interval calculation and then kamu letak di sana, what's my confidence interval? Kalau 80%, 70% or less, nyatakan. And I'm quite certain, right, the boss yang minta, dia orang tidak faham confidence interval, dia orang tidak faham bagaimana mau baca, I will put it there. Not only that, if I can, I would cari data set from other sources as well, bikin perbandingan right there inside the document. So I can always say, oh, we have received this data set, we use this data set, we also have data set number 2 and number 3 from which source, and here are the confidence intervals and margin of error for each data set. Then based on these 3 data sets, our conclusion is blah, blah, blah. So that's the way I would do it lah. Let's say if let's say the boss insists mau guna that data set, but I'll let you know lah, kami tak pernah dapat case macam gini, di mana somebody told us guna data set orang lain, which is actually good lah. From my experience, tak pernah berlaku. Because nobody is that expert to tahu this kind of things right now, but guna data set ni. So it hasn't happened yet. Okay. Somebody ada soalan. From your experience, what are the tips and points to be competent in storytelling of data? Actually this one senang. So what you can do is, pernah dengar pitching? As in pitching, try and say, let's say you have an idea or a concept and then kamu pitch. Yang pitch tu bukan panjang, bukan ucapan atau ceramah panjang, 1-2 minit saja. This gives you the ability to take a complex concept, a system, an idea, and then bikin dia dalam 3-4 ayat saja, dalam 1-2 minit. This makes you a competent storyteller. Rather than kamu bercerita panjang, oh ini projek saya nak bikin ni panjang-panjang, ini objektif lah, ini methodology, ini kajian dia. Let's say ambil thesis kamu. And I ask you, kamu dibagikan 2-3 minit saja untuk explain your thesis. So fikir-fikir dulu and then explain it in just 3-4 ayat. Pitch ni penting, and mungkin anda pernah dengar ni on the entrepreneurship side bah, that kamu masuk, when you're talking to an investor, kamu tidak ada banyak masa. You won't have half an hour to describe your idea. Kamu ada 1 minit saja. So if you can practice pitching, it helps you with your storytelling. Because it's the same thing with data. Kamu tengok data, wah graf besar, ada beribu-ribu rekod, berjuta-juta rekod. But if you know how to pitch, you look at the data, okay, this is our conclusion. This data tells us there are 80% poor people, we should sediakan 14,000 bakul makanan. End of story. If you want to know, tanya soalan. Of course, that's an oversimplification, but the idea is, for better storytelling, you must pandai merumuskan apa yang sedia ada supaya dia fit the required time frame. So let's say anda dibagi 5 minit saja, then okay lah, have a short pitch, a 5-minute chat, and everything else letak dalam, say, graph that proves your point. Jangan letak graph atau bar chart or whatever semata-mata untuk percantikkan your presentation. Make sure everything tells a point of your data story. That way you get your point across clearly. So sometimes you have to sacrifice. Smaller points kena buang. But just so you know, because style tulis thesis is not that suitable for internal company presentations and so on. Because internal presentations is lebih, what's your point? Cepat. And then balik kerja. Whereas maybe the style tulis thesis is lagi sesuai kalau mau tulis proposal if you're suggesting a project to somebody else lah, just so you know. But in terms of data storytelling, it's not really technical skill that's required, but pandai merumus, pandai pitch. So if there's anything else that you remember from this, just belajar pitching. Then senang sikit mau merumuskan data. I hope that is useful to you. Ada soalan lagi?
Ada soalan lagi yang private ni pun boleh tahan ramai juga ni soalan dia. Banyak soalan daripada which one yang ini dulu lah. How to know apa yang perlu ada dalam dataset, Mr. Atta?
How do you know what is inside a data set? Okay, so my understanding daripada soalan ini, how do you know what's inside a data set, is sometimes that bila kami start project, right, we don't know what data that we're supposed to store. So that's the way I'm going to interpret this question. So kami blur. One good example, or satu example is, let's say tadi when we are doing a study, kekerapan pelajar UMS ponteng kelas. Then ingat apa faktor-faktor that contributes kenapa UMS student ponteng kelas. So think about it lah, apa di dalam dataset ni mau kumpul. You might want to do a survey, tapi you tak tahu apa mau masuk dalam tu survey. So you might ingat, okay, I should survey pasal transportation di UMS. I should survey pasal iklim dan cuaca. Tadi that one the contoh. Mungkin sama survey keadaan sama ada jerebu ke, pollution ke apa, sama ada tenaga elektrik dan sebagainya. So sometimes when you look at this susah because then you suddenly realize, data set saya besar, banyak kolom saya mau simpan. So what you can do is look at other data sources yang ada, like other studies. This is part of your literature review. Semasa bikin your thesis, right? Memang ada literature review mah. Literature review bukan maksudnya tengok thesis university orang, tengok thesis saja orang lain. Literature research should be expanded into general research. For example, if you're doing pelajar ponteng sekolah, why not just look at what other people talk about in forums in other universities or colleges? You say what are the factors that contribute to it? Use this to isi kamu punya dataset to kenal pasti apa feel medan-medan yang penting. Then there's another case where I was dibagi satu contoh, food recommendation. So a lot of people ingat food recommendation, right, is semua isi berapa banyak kalori, apa nama makanan dan sebagainya. Tapi there's one way easy to do research mah. Tengok saja Food Panda dan Grab Food. Because Food Panda, Grab Food, more fun, semua is a food recommendation engine yang sudah ada. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Tengoklah apa orang lain bikin. So when you look at Food Panda, you realize they don't just store they don't store nutrient atau nilai kalori. Instead, they store, ini Western, ini Malaysian, ini fusion, ada tag dia. Then dia store harga, berapa banyak, mahal kah, murah kah, and so on. So don't just look at other people's thesis as part of your research bila bikin FYP. Look at other systems. And then jangan takut. When you do this research, tulis dalam thesis kamu. Kami telah bikin analisis, right? Daripada sumber ini, we dapatkan that dataset kami sepatutnya ada ciri-ciri ini. Kami also perhatikan that dalam Food Panda dan Grab Food, dia orang store data macam gini. And then daripada ini, this is where you do synthesis. You take apa yang orang bikin sudah, apa yang kamu kaji juga melalui survey atau melalui interview sama ada face to face, janganlah semasa pandemik, atau via VC, kami bikin sintesis. Maka dataset kami yang kami akan simpan dan kumpul data adalah berdasarkan research kami sebelum ini. So expand your horizons, gunalah kungfu dalam Google and so on. Google around, look for what other people are doing. Tak semestinya secara rasmi. I mean, look at other apps, look at other systems. Cari di GitHub, for example. Mungkin ada orang bikin aplikasi sudah. And then cari lagi dataset di tempat-tempat macam Kaggle, for example. So in this scenario, then maybe you will find something useful. So hopefully that answers sedikit sebanyak mengenai bagaimana nak kenal pasti apa yang perlu diletakkan dalam dataset. So there's also one more reason why lah that I forgot to mention as well. Sebab if kamu bikin dataset asal anda hanya mengikut keperluan sendiri, then your dataset is already biased because dia ikut just pemikiran sendiri. What you have to do is get other people to contribute to that thought. That communication is important because that way dia kurangkan kejadian bias bah. Because otherwise you, as they say in maths, right, correlation does not imply causation. But if your data set is hanya, let's say, kekerapan ponteng sekolah disebabkan transportation issue, right? This can lead to bias because it just so happens kemungkinan pada masa tu semua bus breakdown. But it might be sebab-sebab lain dia orang ponteng bah, bukan because bus breakdown. So in this way, you may accidentally introduce bias because data set anda there's only based on your perception, dia terkongkong hanya kepada medan-medan yang anda fikirkan. So always bagus untuk perluaskan dataset anda. Walaupun ini memperbanyakkan data, dia mengurangkan kejadian bias dalam data. Okay, back to you, Miss Siti.
Alright. Okay, ada lagi soalan private ni. Dia tanya, hello Mr. Arthur, what are the skills do we need to have to be able to secure a job which is related to data?
What are the skills? Okay, when it comes to skills, right? Obviously,
The skills.
yeah, skills and expertise. So just to let you know, as I mentioned earlier, there are some bonus things first lah. Ini bonus, you don't have to know all of them. Obviously, a bit of skill in programming is useful no matter what discipline you're in. Tak kira social science, tak kira school of business, tak kira com science. Com science penting lah. But you should know a little bit of programming. The reason why programming is important is you get into a thought of step-by-step thinking, which means I need to do A, I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. This is very much like the skill of thinking that you have with mathematics or any other task-oriented skill. It helps you process the problem, figure out a solution, and get it out. So the idea about the skill here is programming helps a bit. And especially if you learn stuff like Python, general programming languages, or R, not so PHP boleh lah, but PHP is not so a suitable language for data science. Python, R are languages that are great for statistical analysis, data packages, and so on. Rather than belajar guna MATLAB, SPSS. I'm not saying MATLAB, SPSS, and line statistical tools are useless. Knowledge in them is useful, tapi dawan boleh belajar bah. Boleh pergi Code Academy, boleh pergi Udemy, and so on. And you can learn these things. They are just tools. But programming is a skill. But Tableau, SPSS, Pazjala, those are just tools. You can learn them at any time. But programming is something that will serve you for the rest of your life. That's one skill. Then learning how to communicate, the soft skills and also some of the hard skills. Like for example, let's say tadi ada contoh MOH. MOH data. Adakah pandai guna Git? If you know how to use Git, I will know how to download the data from the data set. So these are small little skills that if you have is a bonus because I can access the data in a way that I want to, I can process it in a way I want to, and I can do it. Now, the hard skills with data science is you must have at least a basic functional understanding of statistics. I tried to keep it less technical, but as I mentioned, things like understanding how confidence interval works, how random sampling works, how population, standard deviation, sisian piawai semua ni, these are obviously the basic fundamentals of data science. Then a little bit of understanding pasal database. How do databases work? Tadi I mentioned kenapa ada barisan, why each setiap row mesti stand alone. Actually, that's the most important thing you need to know pasal database lah. But the reality is, if you have knowledge about programming, knowledge about database, knowledge about statistical analysis, tak semestinya rumit. Basic statistics will work if you're getting into data science, and the ability to look at data and process that data. So when I say that, ini dia. Let's go back to kaggle.com. I think my screen is still sharing. A good way, if you want to put your feet into the industry for data science, is visit kaggle.com. They have competitions, tak payah join. Instead, what you do is, tengoklah data set dia orang. For example, tadi we talk about student spontan class. So we search for student data. So maybe they have some data here that's about student performance in exams, student academic. Then ambil satu daripada dataset ni atau dua atau tiga, practice. Guna Python, guna Excel ke, anything that you want to do, try download the data and then what? Tengok ada food choices. Tadi we were talking about a food selection algorithm. Mungkin this is a useful dataset. See, I click on it. Food choices. Ada code book, ada food dalam docx. Alah tengok docx pun. Tapi ada CSV juga. And then we can see what the data is. See, they do it by gender, by breakfast, by calories, chicken, and so on. So when you participate inside these sort of, not to say participate in competition, tapi just download and look at data, right? You learn new things about the data. So I hope this helps a bit in terms of the skill. But most importantly, you need to practice. Jangan harap university sahaja will teach you this. It cannot. University academics cannot teach you this. You must gain this from self-practice and experience and involve yourself in things like community work, or for that matter, kamu practice sendiri pun boleh, atau if you prefer, belajar sendiri through free training places like Code Academy, Udemy, or local training institutions, for example. So don't harap academia will give you this, because they can't. Academia is a bit small. They are, not to say tekongkong, tapi they say menara gading, ivory tower. So don't just do it dalam menara gading. Look outside the Menara Gading for examples that you can use. So if you're not interested, let's say in this data on Kaggle, then MOH ada, data.gov.my ada juga, boleh practice Python, guna Google Colab and so on. So I hope ini menjawab soalan juga in terms of the skills. Just note lah, I'm a programmer, so I will always talk to it from dari segi programming sikit-sikit lah, because programming tu penting.
Okay, actually banyak lagi soalan Mr. Arthur. Tapi sebab masa mencemburui kita, saya rasa ini
Cemburu
soalan
pula.
last lah ya.
Tak boleh.
Does Sabanet accept internship related to data science and what its requirements?
Okay, saya blunt sikit. Sabanet does have internship program, but it won't be data science specific, which means because Sabanet ni, syarikat Sabanet ni, basically there are three major departments lah. Boleh dikatakan. Satu is systems, another is network, another is software. I'm from the software side. So software ni actually is in a subsidiary yang digital heritage lah, yang dimention tadi. We won't offer data science internships. Memang tak ada. Because we expect our interns to be general purpose. So yes, you will be exposed to some data semasa internship if you are accepted lah. So susah sometimes more aligned schedule. So just understand that we cannot accept many interns. Sometimes memang internship tutup. But if you're interested, if you go to sabah-net.com, website kami lah, boleh cari with Google, and look around on the website, Stemos Punfida. Ada tu, there's a email somewhere there for potential interns to write into our HR department. Bukan saya yang accept interns, is our human resource department based on company needs at the time. But just to note, we don't offer data science, but I'll tell you this lah, no matter which department you go in, sama ada systems, network atau software, you will encounter data science problems because everything needs data. For example, kalau systems, that's about server and server rack. Bukan just mau install server, bukan just install Windows. You also have to think about server reliability. How hot does the server run? The aircon working or not? What does the temperature sensor say and so on? Same thing also for networking. Walaupun switch router, what about network traffic? Cyber security incidents dan sebagainya also requires things like that data science can help. Analysis of cybersecurity incidents and so on. And of course, software, not surprising lah, because software, we build internal systems and external systems for government agencies or private enterprises. We handle a lot of client data. Some of it is private and confidential. Those are the things that you won't be exposed to if you join as an intern. But maybe some basic data like processing, the mere task orientation, project management, and so on, yes, you'll be exposed to that kind of data. So I hope that gives you an idea of that. I think a lot of companies, they also won't offer data science interns lah. They will just minta intern. Tapi the interns, so long as they treat the interns well, you will be exposed to data science during internship or data science techniques and methods during internship. So back to you, Miss Siti. Pukul berapa sudah? Wah, okay, 3:30 sudah.
Right. Okay, Mr. Atul, kalau macam mungkin boleh join rambutan Discord untuk jawab persoalan-persoalan daripada mungkin student-student. Nanti saya bagi, boleh someone send person lah mungkin send link rambutan Discord di chat box. Itu dia.
Okay,
Yang lain
nanti
pun boleh join Discord tu untuk tanya-tanya soalan lah.
nanti saya join.
Mana-mana
I
soalan
will
yang
join dalam mungkin 10 minit. Cause jarang saya guna Discord, so saya kena cari lagi username password saya.
Ya, Mr. Atul. So, mana-mana soalan yang saya tiada ajukan hari ini, saya minta maaf banyak-banyak sebab betul-betul masa mencemburui kita. So, guys, don't forget to fill the feedback form and your attendance. So, to those who want to watch this fifth talk, you guys can go to Facebook Persatuan Mahasiswa Fakulti Komputeran and Informatik and watch it there. So nanti akan ada dihantar juga recording insyaAllah di grup yang kamu ada sekarang lah. So before we end this talk session, can you guys on your camera and let's have a picture together? Okay, come on.
Semua shy tu.
No shy.
Wah, lama I tidak login dalam Discord. I'm an occasional gamer. Sometimes masuk dalam Discord, tapi jarang.
Wow, gamer.
Occasional saja.